You already know the monster in the maze. A vast dark thing with the body of a man and the head of a bull, waiting in the black heart of a labyrinth, snorting in the dark, mad with hunger for human flesh. You know the hero who went in to kill it, Theseus, with a sword in one hand and a spool of thread in the other. And you know how the story is supposed to make you feel relief. Because the beast is dead and the beast was only ever a beast. That is the Minotaur you were handed, the boss at the end of the level, the monster at the center of the maze. The thing you are meant to be glad is gone. But the older story, the one buried underneath the video game version, is stranger than that and sadder than that, and it starts with a single fact the pop version quietly deletes. The monster in the maze had a name. He was a child. And the real monster of this whole tale never set foot in the labyrinth at all. He stood outside it wearing a crown. His name was Asterion. Sit with that for a second because almost nobody knows it. Asterion or Asterius, depending on who is telling the tale, a Greek name that means more or less the starry one, the ruler of the stars. Somebody looked at the creature the world remembers as a mindless beast and called him Starlight. That was his actual name. And here is the quiet cruelty in what we call him instead. The word Minotaur is not a name at all. It is a label and a brand. It means, quite simply, the bull of Minos, Minos being the king of Crete, the man who caged him. So every single time you say the Minotaur, you are not naming the creature. You are stamping him with the mark of the king who imprisoned him, the way you would tag a piece of property with its owner. The starry child had a name. Someone could have called him gently in the dark. The world threw it away and called him someone else's bull instead. I'm the myth keeper, and I have walked the winding stone of that labyrinth in the old stories, down past every blind turn to the cold room at the center where a frightened thing was kept in the dark. And I can tell you the beast you were sold is a costume draped over a much older, much lonelier creature. The tellers we lean on here, Apollodorus, who gathered the Greek myths into a whole library of them. The Roman poet Ovid, Plutarch in his life of Theseus, and Diodorus of Sicily, they do not always agree with one another, and I am going to flag it every single time they part ways, because the mythkeeper doesn't lie to you. But underneath all their disagreements sits the same buried, uncomfortable shape. This was never really the story of a hero killing a monster. It is the story of the gods punishing a proud man and an innocent child paying the entire bill. So let's go back to the beginning, which is not a monster and not a maze, but a king and a broken promise. Minos wanted the throne of Crete. In the old tellings, he needed a sign, public undeniable proof, that the gods themselves had chosen him to rule over his brothers. So he prayed to Poseidon, the god of the sea, and he made the god an offer. "Send me a sign," Minos prayed. "Send a bull up out of the waves, a bull so magnificent that everyone who lays eyes on it will know the sea itself stands behind my crown. And I swear to you, Poseidon, the moment it comes ashore, I will sacrifice it straight back to you as your rightful due." And Poseidon answered him. Up out of the flat sea rose a bull unlike anything on earth, pure white, huge, flawless, gleaming, so beautiful it barely looked like an animal at all. It looked like something a god had made by hand. The whole crowd saw it come ashore. The sign worked. Minos got his crown, and then Minos looked at that perfect white bull he had sworn to kill, and he did not want to give it up. This is the crack the whole tragedy pours out of. The bull was too magnificent to burn. So Minos, the brand new king, the man who had just sworn a personal oath to a god in front of his entire people, decided he would cheat. He hid the beautiful bull away among his own herds to keep it for himself, and he dragged some ordinary bull out of the field and sacrificed that one instead, and he told himself a god would never notice the difference. Pride and greed in a single act. He wanted the sign and the gift both. He wanted to take from a god and give nothing back. Gods notice. And here is where the punishment lands, and watch exactly where it lands, because this is the whole moral engine of the myth. Poseidon does not strike Minos down. He does not sink his fleet or wither his crown or touch a hair on the guilty king's head. He aims lower and crueler. He reaches straight past the man who wronged him and lays the punishment on the king's household, on Minos' wife, the queen Pasiphae, who had done nothing wrong at all. In most tellings, Poseidon works the curse through Aphrodite, the goddess of desire, and I am going to keep this exactly at the level the old poets kept it, because it is a tragedy and not a spectacle. Pasiphae was struck with an unnatural, overpowering, God-sent longing for that white bull, not a wish she formed. A curse, a compulsion forced into her by an angry god, aimed entirely at humiliating her husband through her. She could not reason it away. It was divine punishment wearing the shape of desire, and she was its target for one reason only, because wounding her was the surest way to wound Minos. And out of that cursed union, an act that was never hers to choose, forced into the world by a god settling a score with a king, a child was born. Half a bull, half a boy. A living creature with the young body of a child and the head of a calf, who had done nothing, chosen nothing, asked for nothing at all. He was, from his very first breath, the visible evidence of a god's revenge and a king's broken word. And his name was Asterion, the starry one, and he never once had a chance. Now put yourself in Minos' place for a moment, because the next choice he makes is the one that turns this from a sad story into a damning one. His wife has given birth to a creature that is living proof, for anyone with eyes, that he cheated a god and the god cheated him back. The whole shining kingdom he built to prove the gods loved him now holds a small horned child that screams the opposite from every corner of the palace. So what does a proud king do with the walking evidence of his own downfall? He hides it. The child could not be nursed or raised the way an ordinary child is raised, and Minos, humiliated past bearing, could not stand for the world to lay eyes on him. So he sent for the greatest inventor who ever lived, Daedalus, the master craftsman, the man who could build absolutely anything, and he commissioned a prison so cunning that whatever went into it could never find its way back out. The Labyrinth, a maze of winding passages folding endlessly back on themselves, unsolvable by design, built by a genius for one single purpose: to swallow a boy whole and hide a king's shame in the dark. And there is your monster in the maze. Read it again, slowly. The labyrinth was not built to keep a rampaging beast away from innocent people. It was built to keep an innocent child away from the eyes of a father who was ashamed of him. Asterion was not put in the dark because he was dangerous. He was put in the dark because he was proof. He was imprisoned from childhood for the crime of existing, for the crime of being the exact shape his father's pride had made. But a boy grows even in the dark, and a hidden thing still has to eat. And here the tale turns from sad to grim, and I am not going to soften it for you. Minos went to war against Athens, and he won. And the price he set on the defeated city was the cruelest tribute in all of Greek myth. Every few years, Athens had to load a ship with its own young people, youths and maidens, in most tellings 7 and 7, and send them across the sea to Crete into the labyrinth to be fed to the thing at its center. Children of the enemy walked into the dark to keep the hidden child alive. And this is where our hero finally walks on stage. Theseus, the young prince of Athens, volunteers to go as one of the tribute, one of the 14 fed into the maze, so that he can find the creature at the heart of it and kill it. Minos' own daughter, Ariadne, falls in love with him, and she gives him the one thing that beats the labyrinth, a ball of thread to tie at the entrance and unspool behind him as he goes, so that after the killing he can follow it back out into the light. He goes in. He finds Asterion in the dark. He kills him, and he follows the thread back up into the sun and sails home a legend. And in the version we inherited, that is a clean triumph. The monster is dead. The children are saved. The prince is a hero forever, and every word of that is true. But stand for one moment on the other side of it, down in the dark, where the thing Theseus came to kill had been sitting alone since it was a child, in a prison built by its own father, having chosen none of this, having never once in its life been outside, And the exact same scene reads a completely different way. A frightened, caged, cursed creature, killed in the only home it ever knew by a stranger who sailed across the sea specifically to end it. Both of those are in the myth at the same time. The hero and the victim are the same death, and which one you see depends entirely on who you were taught to stand beside. And here I owe you the honesty this whole channel runs on, because the sources genuinely diverge, and anyone who hands you one clean, tidy version is quietly doing some editing. They disagree on almost every tender detail. They disagree on exactly why Poseidon sent the curse at all, whether it was Minos withholding the sacrifice, or an older slight, or Aphrodite with her own reasons folded in. They disagree about Pasiphae. Some tell her part with pity, some with disgust, some barely tell it at all. They even disagree on what Asterion physically was. Some describe a man's body with a bull's head, some the reverse, some barely describe him and leave the whole horror of him to your imagination. And most of all, they diverge on how you are meant to feel about him. Most of the tradition treats him flatly as a monster that simply needed killing. But even in the ancient world there were readers who felt the wrongness of it, who noticed that the creature had a name, that he was born of a curse and caged without a trial, and who saw a victim where the hero story wanted a beast. That reading is not something modern people invented yesterday to be contrary. It has been sitting quietly folded inside the myth the entire time. When I tell you Asterion was a victim, I am not overriding the sources. I am simply reading the half of them that the pop version leaves lying on the floor. So let's go deeper, because an 18-minute walk into a labyrinth should show you more than one room. Start with that name again, Asterion, the starry one. Why on earth would anyone call a caged bull-child starlight? Nobody can tell you for certain, and I will not pretend otherwise, so take this as the careful best guess of people who have spent their lives on it. Some read the name as an old, half-erased memory of something sacred, a hint that behind this monster in a maze there may once have stood a bull tied to the stars, to the slow turning of the night sky, to sacrifice. A creature that in some far older layer of belief was not a horror to be stabbed in the dark at all, but something holy, something watched and honored overhead. If there is anything to that, then the story we ended up telling did not merely cage a child. It took something people once looked up at with awe and buried it at the bottom of a maze. Then there is the labyrinth itself, which is as much a character in this story as any person in it. It is the masterpiece of Daedalus, the cleverest man alive, and think hard about what his genius was actually spent on. The greatest mind of the age, and a king used it to build a machine for hiding a child, and it poisons nearly everyone it touches. Later, that same king would lock Daedalus himself inside the maze to keep it secret, and Daedalus would escape the only way left to him, by building wings and flying out over the sea, in the very story that kills his own son Icarus, who flew too near the sun. The labyrinth is a monument to what happens when brilliance is bent to serve a powerful man's shame instead of the truth. It ruins the child it hides, the genius who builds it, and the boy who flies from it. And underneath even that, there is a real place, and this is where the myth brushes right up against actual archaeology. On the island of Crete, at a site called Knossos, there really was a vast Bronze Age palace. An enormous complex of hundreds of rooms and twisting corridors folding into one another, so sprawling and intricate that a visitor could genuinely lose their way inside it. And the people who built it, the culture we now call the Minoans, named, as it happens, after this very King Minos, were absolutely soaked in the image of the bull. Their art is full of bulls. Their walls show young athletes seizing bulls by the horns and vaulting clean over their backs in a breathtaking, death-defying ritual we call bull leaping. Great horns of stone crown the palace. Now, no one can draw you a straight line from those ruins to this legend, and I am not going to pretend the archaeology proves the myth, because that is a leap the honest ones refuse to make. But it is a very good best guess that somewhere in the long memory of a real maze-like palace, ruled by a real bull-obsessed culture, where real young people really did dance with real bulls, and surely sometimes died doing it, the seed of this story was planted. The legend may be the long shadow that a real place threw across 1,000 years. And once you truly see the shape of the Minotaur, you start seeing it everywhere in myth. It is a pattern the old stories return to again and again. The gods, when they want to punish the powerful, so rarely punish the powerful directly. They curse the innocent standing nearest to them. A king offends, and it is his wife, his child, his whole city that ends up paying. The sin is committed at the top, and the bill is always handed down. Asterion is the purest version of that pattern there is, a child who was, quite literally, born as somebody else's punishment. He did not commit the sin. He was the sentence. And then watch what time itself did to him. In the oldest bones of the story, he is Asterion, a named thing born of a curse, a tragedy with a face. Retelling after retelling, century after century, the name falls off first. He becomes just the Minotaur, the bull of the man who caged him. Then the curse origin gets shortened because it is uncomfortable to sit with, until he is simply a monster who was always a monster and always had been. Then the video games and the movies arrive, and he becomes a boss, a wall of muscle and rage at the end of a level, existing for no reason on earth except to be beaten by the player, with no name, no mother, no father's shame, no story at all. Every retelling sanded away a little more of the child, until all that was left of him was the beast. We did not inherit the Minotaur. We manufactured him, one small forgetting at a time. So let me hold the two of them up beside each other now, the way this channel always does, because the gap between them is the entire point. The Minotaur on the screen is a boss. He is a mindless wall of rage in the dark, a monster who was always a monster, and his whole purpose in the story is to be terrifying and then to be killed so a hero can feel like a hero. He is easy. You look at him and you know at once exactly what he is for, and it is a comfortable thing to know because it asks nothing of you. The real one is not a boss. He is Asterion, the starry one, a child of a curse he did not cast, caged in the dark by a father who was ashamed of him, fed the children of a conquered city because a king needed his secret kept alive, and finally killed in the only room he had ever known. He does not need to be evil for the story to work. He only needs to have a name. And the moment he has one, the whole thing turns inside out. The screen made the Minotaur a monster you are glad to see die. The oldest story made him a child you are meant to grieve. Those are not the same tale. They are not even close. And that, in the end, is the thing I want you to carry back out of the maze with you. A monster is what a story becomes when the winners are the ones telling it, and the powerful need their shame kept in the dark. So think, for a second, about who actually benefits from the version you were handed. Not Asterion, he is dead in every single telling, no matter who narrates it. The one who benefits is Minos. Minos, the king who broke his oath to a god out of pure greed, who cursed his own household by cheating, who caged a child to hide his mistake, who fed other people's children into the dark to keep his secret fed. That man walks out of the popular story with clean hands. Remembered, if he is remembered at all, as a stern and rightful king, even a wise one. Because if the thing in the maze is just a mindless monster, then locking it away was only sensible, and killing it was heroic, and nobody ever has to stop and ask what the king did to put it there in the first place. But the instant the monster has a name, the instant he is Asterion, the starry one, a cursed child caged for the crime of being born, the whole story flips over, and the real monster steps at last into the light. It was never the confused, half-blind thing crouched in the dark at the center. The real monster of the Minotaur is the pride of a king. It always was. It is wearing a crown, and it is standing outside the maze it paid a genius to build, calmly dusting off its hands, and letting the whole world remember its victim as the beast, so that no one in 3,000 years ever looks too closely at the man. So here is what I honestly want to know down in the comments, and I will be reading them. First, the simple one. Before today, did you have any idea the Minotaur even had a name, that he was Asterion, the starry one, or was he always just the monster to you? Be honest, because almost nobody is ever taught the name, and I want to see just how completely it got erased. And then the harder one, the one I keep turning over in my own head, villain or victim, how do you read him now? Is Asterion a beast that needed killing, or a cursed child who never had a chance, or somehow both of those at once? Tell me down below, and tell me which mask you would like me to pull off next. I'm the Myth Keeper. This whole channel is about the gods and the monsters you think you know, and the far older, far sadder ones the real stories actually wrote down, waiting underneath the costumes that later tellers draped over them. So take the thread, and come back down into the dark with me again soon. There are a great many more names down here that the world quietly traded for the single word monster, and not one of them is ever quite the beast you were told.